I've had the privilege during the break to talk to Kevin Powell, and I'm discovering that he is very much like his prose, as erudite, as thoughtful, as kind as his books present his mind. Welcome to the program, the one and only, we all know him, Kevin Powell. What's up, Kevin?
It's an honor to be here. And I'm so glad I got to listen to you and Ms. Pittman a moment ago, because I really, really enjoyed that interview you all just did. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I received that. I take all compliments and gifts. Listen, so I want to ask you a very similar question to the way I started with Erica, but in a different way. Would you mind telling me what has inspired you the most in the last 3 to 4 months in the life of this country, COVID, the second great awakening, or the third great awakening, as I call it? What has inspired you the most?
Oh my gosh, that's a powerful question. And that's why I loved your interview with Ms. Pittman. You asked deep questions. I'll be honest with you, I was deeply depressed when the pandemic hit at first, because I was like, I make a lot of my living as a public speaker, and I'm out there around the country touching people. And I literally, the last trip I actually made was actually to Los Angeles. I spent 2 weeks out there. It was actually at Kobe Bryant's memorial. I had a couple of speeches out there. And then imagine getting back home and it's just all shut down, lost my income, everything. But what inspired me is the kindness of people, friends and strangers. We are resilient people, human beings, when we have to be, when we want to be. That's inspired me. Myself and a photographer named Kay Hickman went out in April in New York City, which at that time was the epicenter for the whole country. We actually went to all 5 boroughs in one day and documented what was happening, interviewing people, encountering people who were COVID survivors, and also knowing some folks who lost their lives. That I found in myself during the course of all of it, before George Floyd, before Breonna Taylor, before the protests started. Just, I said, Kev, you gotta do what you've been called to do. Just like you're doing what you're doing, Dr. Sean. You have to do your work. No matter what's happening, you have to do your work. And I've been writing in a way that I have not written in these last 4 months since the 90s, to be honest with you, since I was at Vibe magazine. And it's just been spilling out and trying to be of service in any way I can. And then obviously with the protests, as Dave Chappelle said, 8 minutes and 46 seconds of watching this police officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, or the fact that Breonna Taylor, we got to talk about Black women as well being killed by the police in her own home, and she's killed, and the officers have still not been arrested. And my heroes and sheroes have names like Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston. And I said, you know what? Those folks ain't coming back. We got to do it. Dr. Sean's got to do it. Erica Pittman's got to do it. Kevin Powell's got to do it. So that's what inspires me, knowing that, 100 years from now, I want people to say that I contributed something to try to help them move this needle, as we say.
First of all, I love you already. that's A. And B, God, that was so rich and impactful and powerful. Because what I get and what I gather from you is the tension and the conflict of personally being affected by the moment, but overcoming that with a commitment to your art, to your gift, to your calling. Oh, that's inspiring, man. It really is. It really is. I had Tabitha Brown on the show a few weeks ago. One of the things she said that I keep repeating to people because it was so brilliant to me is, if you are an artist, this is the time to create.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I've been talking a lot about Marvin Gaye's What's Going On the last couple of days. And fingers crossed, I can't say what it is, but when I ever say it, I want to come back on your show and announce it, but What's Going On was written during a time of great turmoil. Don't forget, his close friend Tammy Terrell died tragically, only in her 20s. Vietnam was happening. Dr. King had been killed. Civil rights movement was coming to an end. And he creates this masterpiece that we still listen to almost 50 years later, And so I think that, that's the beauty of it. I mean, what have I learned in these 4 months? How to cut my own hair. How to cook more than, I'm a vegan, sir, but how to cook more than veggie burgers. You know what I'm saying? You have to be, and I can't complain, because I'm like, I think about my mother, as a single mother raising me with the 8th grade education. That's why Ms. Pittman's interview touched me, because she talked about her mother. Same thing here. Shout out to Black mothers, the mothers of all backgrounds, but single mothers in our communities. You're from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, you know what I'm talking about. And definitely shout out to fathers who represent, without question. But I come from poverty. I come from nothing. You know, I don't take for granted that this is my 14th book and I've been blessed to do things. And this whole situation has made me really, really, really appreciate life and the human spirit in a different kind of way. Because the material stuff means nothing if your soul is rotten. You know what I'm saying? If you're not here to also try to help other people. And that's what my life is about. Yeah.
Yeah. The poet says, I must be measured by my soul, for the mind is the standard of the man. Listen, I got to take a break. Kevin Powell, you done wore me out. I need a break and a drink of water. that's how good you just been. I need some damn water. We'll be right back. The Book of Sean, Fox Soul, Kevin Powell. We'll be back. 14th one. And when you hear the title, you're going to think what I think, or thought rather, when I heard it. And my immediate thought when I heard the title of this book was, why didn't I think of that? Here it is. The title of your new book, Kevin, When We Free the World. I absolutely love it because it is a postulation. And I love that. I love the fact that you are postulating that is potentially possible. At least that's how I read the title. But tell me about it. Where does this title come from, and am I reading it correctly? Because I've been known to read stuff wrong.
No, you're reading correctly. The original title was actually the famous song that Billy Taylor created that Nina Simone made more famous in the 60s, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. I actually went so far as to call Billy Taylor's daughter, Kim Taylor Thompson, who's a really prominent civil rights attorney here in New York City, and asked for her blessing to use the title. But then one day, I said, man, you know, I think the title is way too long. I ended up using it for the last essay. But I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. My fraternity brother, David Young out of Ohio, said, you know, I said, well, can you help me come up with a title? He's excellent titles. He said, well, what about When We Free the World? So I got to give credit to him. And I was like, that's perfect. And this title, I came up with this title before the pandemic, before all this craziness with Trump saying the pandemic is over, before the protests and everything else. And I purposely, the cover is an image of young people from age 8 to their 20s, Black, white, Latinx, Asian, Native American, straight, gay, all kinds of identities. And that was inspired by a famous Richard Avedon photo from the 1960s that has Julian Bond and other Black and white young people who were civil rights workers. And it's actually they're standing as if they're marching. So there's no way I could have predicted. Fast forward a few months, here we are with young people of all different backgrounds saying Black Lives Matter, and it's deep. But I mean, that's the universe. That's all I can say. But the book is really about this country. I mean, I have an open letter to my unborn child. I'm not a father yet, but I want to be a father, and I talk about this world that he or she or they would be brought into, you know, as a Black child, or you know, and whether they're straight or queer, you know, no matter what their gender identity, you know, the things they'd have to deal with if they're a girl, the sexism they'll have to deal with, the things that Ms. Pittman was just talking about, both boy and girl, or no gender identity, just being Black and having to deal with the reality of racial profiling. It's an intense book, you know. I spilt my soul into it. It's very personal. I talk about some racist experiences that I experienced myself, ironically, in Minnesota, and also here in New York City.
In 2018, is that right?
That's 2000. That's correct, in 2018.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I'll be honest with you, the first version of the book was mad angry. I was mad. I was just angry. But then I went back. I said, Kev, think about James Baldwin, you know, think about Dr. King. And let's not forget the love part of this, you know.
Oh, yes. I got to cut you off because listen, I've been saying that so much over these past 3 months that if we just persist in the rage, we will eventually eat our own tails. But love has to be a part of it. It has to be a part of how we seek to postulate and reimagine a world beyond the vicissitudes of the one that we live in. And that's what I love about what you just said, is that you found a way to get over the rage. Now, here's my question to you. I'm going to ask you a philosophical question, because I am a philosopher. So let me use this education. Ready? Brace yourself now. Let this question work on you any way it wants to. Yes, and sir. Kevin Powell, and what is freedom?
Woo! Freedom to me is the right to be the totality of who you are, completely, without any fear of someone injuring you because of who you are. It could be because of your race, your gender identity, your class background, your religion or spiritual practice, your ability or disability. Um, and we know that people have been hurt and killed because of who they are. They've been raped and assaulted because of who they are. They've been kneed to death for 8 minutes and 46 seconds because of who they are. You know what I mean? And so freedom is the ability to go anywhere at any time and not feel like your life can be damaged in some way simply because of who you are. That's what freedom means to me.
That is so rich and powerful. And it is what my soul yearns for, not just for me, but for everybody I know and everybody that I am connected to and everybody in the world. I wish everybody would know that kind of freedom. And so having given that kind of answer, you beg a follow-up question, and that being, Kevin, and how do we free the world?
There's a need, and I'm sure you've talked about this on the show, and we see it because of all the protests that have happened. There's a need for a massive re-education in America and this entire planet. You know, I heard Ms. Pittman use the word African people as folks who built this country. They were enslaved. You know, it is tragic that I could go to school in Jersey City, New Jersey, where I was born and raised. Shout out to Brooklyn. I've been there for 30 years for sure. K through 12, I was an A student. My 13 years of education, doesn't matter if you go to public school or private school, I can go, but in those 13 years, Black history might have totaled a page or two in 13 years. I'm talking about math, science, English, social studies, just all of it. My education around Latinx people, Native American people, Asian people, women, the LGBTQ plus community, disabled people, poor people, minuscule. I mean, how do you go to school for 12, 13 years and half the class is women or girls, half the country is women and girls, half the world's women and girls, and I learned only about 5 women's names in 13 years of an education. Little wonder, you know, the sexism that Ms. Pittman talked about in your last segment. And so how do you free the world? We have to free our minds. I mean, it's a cliche. We've been hearing it for years, but you got to ask yourself, how have I been educated? Do I even know who I am? You know what I'm saying? And, you know, white sisters and brothers, as they're out there protesting, and I'm appreciative of them saying Black Lives Matter and questioning white supremacy and questioning white silence, but they even have been grossly miseducated because before you were white, you're Jewish, you're Italian, you're Irish, you're Polish, you're German, you're all these different identities. But once your ancestors got to this country as immigrants, they were told to strip away their cultural heritage and just become white, which was the thing that was the antithesis of being Black or people of color. You feel what I'm saying? And so even they now realize, because white sisters and brothers are asking, what do I read? What do I watch? What do I do? You know, because they realized their education was bankrupt as well. And so you can't be free if you don't know who you are. It's really simple. You cannot be free if you don't know who you are.
No, that's rich. That's absolutely rich. And it is indicting in all the best ways. I mean, how in the world can you purport as a nation to have educated me and you left out teaching me about 2/3 of the world?
I mean, if I can say this, think about it. This is When We Free the World is my 14th book. I did not know until I got to college on a financial aid package from a program that was created during the civil rights movement for poor kids like me, that Black people wrote books. Not until I got to college. No Langston Hughes, no Nikki Giovanni, no Maya Angelou, no Toni Morrison, you know, no Mary Baraka, none of it. And so my yearbook actually says that I wanted to be an accountant, even though I knew in my bones that I was a writer. If you don't see it, you don't think it's possible. Yeah. It's pretty basic. And so I was imprisoned even by the lack of imagination, because my education didn't even give me an imagination to think that I could actually be a writer. But once I found out, oh, the Harlem Renaissance, oh, the negritude writers from the West Indies and from Africa, oh my God, then I was like, man, I can do this. That's how I got to the 14 books.
Well, and we're so glad you did, by the way. Let me just say that clearly. Kevin Powell, I got to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about the book and a little more rather about your journey and what makes you this unique cultural figure, this activist, this media guru, if I may say so, but also someone who remains grounded and in touch with the deep desires and aspirations of your people. The book was shown on Fox. So I'll be back. Kevin Powell's not going anywhere, so don't cry. And he ain't putting no money in your meters either. Welcome back, everybody. I'm talking to Kevin Powell, and specifically about his new book, When We Freed the World, a title that sparks great envy in me. He said I did not think of that title, nor did I write this book. But anyhow, I'm glad Kevin is here. Kevin, thank you again for being on. And already you have blessed us. You have given us things to think about and inspired us. It's amazing, really, because when I think about your book, and particularly the essay that you mentioned earlier, the letter to your unborn child, it makes me want to ask you two questions. The first one, answer shortly, and the second one, you can go as long as you want. The first one is, what would you say to your 9-year-old, 10-year-old self?
Whew. Wow, what would I say to my 9-year-old, 10-year-old self? What I say to all children when I encounter them: you are a genius. You are a genius. Don't ever forget that you're a genius. I say that to children every time I encounter children of all races, all cultures, wherever I go. You are a genius.
I love that. I love that. And so let me continue and follow up. Therefore, so what is your essential, your eternal, your abiding message to your unborn child?
Be better than me. Be wiser than me. Be greater than anything I could have done. Be humble, be humble, be humble, be humble. Believe in yourself, no matter what. You know, Dr. Sean, when I was a child, my self-esteem was terrible, even though I was a so-called smart kid, an A student, but I had terrible self-esteem. And I remember the song that stuck with me was The Greatest Love of All. You know, people know the Whitney Houston version, but the version that George Benson did for the Muhammad Ali, that was before it. That song blew my mind because I found hope in that song, and I found hope in Billie Holiday's God Bless the Child as a kid. You know, those things were things I held on to. I see it now with children and adults who struggle with self-esteem. I mean, I still struggle with it, but I do have affirmations and my prayers and meditations daily. But I think that's one of the biggest things for us is believing in ourselves. You know, not only are we not taught or who we are in our society, I think that education, if we could revamp the whole educational system, self-love should be one of the first things that we're taught, you know, self-love and self-care. And that's woefully missing. And unfortunately, you know, my mother didn't know. She did the best that she could. I would not be who I am without her. But I think that it hurts me to see so many people that are still really wounded out there in this country. I mean, and you can see all the confusion that the pandemic has brought out. You can see the lack of self-care and self-love when people are reckless with not wearing a mask, or the mask is around their chin, it's under their neck, it's on their shoulders, in their back pocket. I'm like, you know, because if you don't love yourself, you're not going to care about other people. You know what I mean? Right. And that's what I would say to any child, any and adults as well. Adults need to hear it too. Self-love, self-love.
I love the notion that one of the courses or part of the syllabus of any curriculum ought to be teaching children how to emphatically, insanely, bravely love themselves. That I have never heard anybody suggest that, and it's so intuitive that you wonder, why in the hell don't we do that? Why isn't that a part of what we teach children outside of the lies that we teach them about a history that we're continually. Let me not go down that road. Anyway, so let me ask you this. Right, I'm about to blab on, Kevin, and then then I lose control of the show. But here's what I want to ask you, because you've written 14 books, and I'm fascinated by writing and writers. How does writing a book change you?
Oh, it's hard. Writing a book is hard. Any book. Well, when I was younger, I was neurotic about it. I wouldn't leave the house for days. Even if it was just one sentence, I was like, I can't leave until I get that one sentence. And I'm the kind of writer, and I've written poetry books, I've written essay books, I've done an autobiography. My next book is a biography of Tupac Shakur that's going to be coming out in 2021. And then I shifted. I said, Kev, you can't let this, you love writing. You can't come to be stressed out by it. So now my process is, people ask me, do I write every day? I don't write every day, but I think about writing every single day. Writing is as important to me as breathing. And what I do, Dr. Sean, I listen to a lot of music. I watch a lot of movies. You know, if the pandemic wasn't happening, I'm at theater. It could be dance performances, whatever it is. So I'm an artist. I'm clear that I'm a creative person. And so I try to be inspired. I'm always reading stuff, you know. Even when you were interviewing Miss Pittman, I was online and she was talking, looking up stuff that she's done and reminding, you know, because I love researching. And so all of it is part of writing for me. So I try to make it as good a process as possible, a positive experience. I write usually in the mornings. I'm up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning.
Well, you're like Toni Morrison.
I exactly like Toni Morrison. I still do writing by hand a lot too. I do put notes in my phone. Little words or phrases will come to me, or I'll hear people say stuff, I'll write it down, you know. But writing is magical if you can get it done. I mean, I'm kind of like, one thing that Tupac Shakur said to me when I interviewed him on one of the many occasions at Vibe magazine is that he just wanted to hear his name on the radio one time. Dr. Sean, my first article was when I was 20 years old for the Black American newspaper, which was run by a West Indian brother in New York back in the 80s. And I was so excited that I saw my name in the paper. I'm still the same kid all these years later. When I see my name on a new book, I'm like, man, there it is again. You know, it's just, you never lose that hunger. I'm as hungry as I was when I was 20. And it's just, writing has saved my life. Writing is therapy for me. And what I probably get out of it most is the number of letters and emails and social media messages I get from people who say this line or this poem. You know, I remember being in Kansas once, and I read, there's a poem I wrote called For Aunt Kathy. It's about one of my mother's sisters, my aunt that I was closest to, ending up in a mental institution. I had nothing else to do but to write this poem. This poem was written by a Black woman. I'm in Kansas at a conference for Langston Hughes. And when it was over, an older white woman came up to me and she said to me, I'm Aunt Kathy too. That blew my mind, because I realized in that moment, it's very true. If you write from your specific experiences, whether you're male or female or non-gender conforming, Black, white, whatever your background is, if you just tell the truth about your story, you know, fiction or nonfiction doesn't matter, you know, it will touch other people. Just tell the truth. And that really struck a nerve for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know, if I may, Michel Foucault, you know, the French philosopher, he said that if you write about the speck of dirt under your own fingernail,
that's right,
in great specificity, you will discover that word will be a universal message, because everybody has a speck of dirt under their fingernail.
I mean, I didn't know any Black writers in high school, but imagine me, a little poor Black boy, when I discovered Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether it's just noble in the mind to suffer the slings and hours of outrageous fortune and to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. I'm that Black boy who still remembers those lines from when I was 14 years old. I'm trying not to get emotional because it spoke to me. You know what I mean? Just like S.E. Hinton's The Outsider spoke to me, just like Charles Dickens spoke to me. You feel what I'm saying? And those were different worlds of mine, but they spoke to me. You know what I mean? And that's what art should do. And that's what I think why you're going to see some incredible art that's going to come out of these protests continually and the pandemic, because we need people to tell the truth, which is what you're doing with this show, this platform. We need to speak to people and touch people. You know what I'm saying? Listen,
regrettably, I got to go. I'm out of time, but I'm telling you, I could talk to you all day and half the night. That's how much I enjoy listening to your mind. It is such a balanced and sumptuous meal to sit at the table of your life. And I want to thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your work and your commitment. Will you come back on?
I promise I will. And just thank you for the opportunity. And thank you again for your great staff, all the folks at Fox Soul. Y'all have been wonderful. And I'm just grateful to be alive. And I just want us to keep spreading love to each other, you know what I'm saying? No matter what's happening out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shout out to Jocelyn Jackson and Destiny DuBose. They are, you know, they're the people that make me. They're the people that make me look good. Listen, everybody, I got to go. I'll be back tomorrow. I promise you that. We'll have more great guests. Thank you, Erica Pittman and Kevin Powell, for being on the program tonight. Be good to each other, my friends.